You may be pretty familiar with the phrase of being a go-getter. And the chances are, if you're listening to this broadcast right now, you are a go-getter. You are someone who goes out there, knows what they want, and they take action. And you're a business owner, a solopreneur, or a coach. You're out there making moves and taking action to create the life that you want to live and to create the business that you want to live. But you might have also heard of the phrase of go-giver. What is a go-giver? And how is it different from being a go-getter? What is the opposite of being a go-giver? We're going to cover all of these things today in our conversation with Bob Burg, who needs no introduction, but I'll be giving you that introduction here in just 1 second. This conversation is going to help you to build your successful business, and these principles will overlap into your personal life as well. The principles are all the same. You know the fee for the Be Better broadcast. The only thing we ask is when you take away some piece of value, some insight, philosophy, strategy that helps you personally or professionally, share this show with just one person. We don't run ads. We don't have sponsors. We do that so it's an uninterrupted experience for you. And by the way, put your comments down there. What do you think of this conversation and what questions do you have for Bob? So without further ado, let's talk to Bob Burg. And for those who don't know Bob, for over 30 years, Bob has been successfully showing entrepreneurs, leaders, and sales professionals how to communicate their value and accelerate their referral business. His business parable, The Go-Giver, co-authored with John David Mann, has created a worldwide movement. While part of a 4-book series, The Go-Giver itself has sold more than 1 million copies and has been translated into 30 languages. Bob is an advocate, supporter, and defender of the free enterprise system, believing that the amount of money one makes is directly proportional to how many people they serve. He's also an unapologetic animal fanatic, and he served on the board of directors of Furry Friends Adoption and Clinic in his town of Jupiter, Florida. Bob, thanks so much for making the time to be here this morning.
Oh, my pleasure, Brandon. Thanks for having me.
You know, we're all pretty familiar, or I'm going to assume we're all pretty familiar with the phrase go-getter.
Sure.
But years ago, you introduced the phrase of go-giver. And I've seen this book for years and years and years. And one of my friends, Frank Agan, who I was connected with on LinkedIn recently,
I love
probably
Frank.
6
He's a
months.
great guy. Yeah.
Incredible guy. And I figured you'd like him because you guys are very similar to me in terms of the things that you speak about, right? You're always about adding more value, doing good for other people. And Frank promoted that you were hosting an event with him. And I said, you know what? I got to listen to this book. And I did. And it was absolutely incredible. It's a short book and it's right to the point and it's told in a story-like format, which is absolutely incredible. So can you give us like an overview of what is a go-giver and how is it different from being a go-getter?
Well, sure. A go-giver is simply someone who understands that shifting their focus and Brandon, this is really where it all begins. Shifting their focus from getting to giving. Now, when we say giving in this context, we simply mean constantly and consistently providing immense value to others, understanding that doing so is not only a more pleasant, a more fulfilling way of conducting business, it's also the most financially profitable way as well. Now, this is not for any way out there woo-woo magical mystical type of reasons. Just give good and good. No, not at all. It's actually very logical. It's very rational. It's quite practical. It's really understanding human nature, that when you're that person who can take your focus off of yourself and place it on serving others, discovering what they want, what they need, what they desire, helping people to overcome and solve their challenges, helping move people closer to happiness. People feel good about you. People want to get to know you. They like you. They trust you. They want to be in relationship with you. They want to do business with you. They certainly want to tell others about you. They want to be your personal walking ambassadors. So that's really, the essence of what being a go-giver is all about.
Yeah. And I love that definition, by the way. And in the book, again, I love the way that the story is told, and I'm not going to spoil it for those who haven't read the book, but it's essentially about the main character, Joe, who's a salesperson, and he's a successful salesperson, right? He does well for himself, but he's looking to close a big deal, right? And he hears of this man named Pindar who could help him to do so.
Mm-hmm.
And number one, he was very surprised that Pindar even gave him the time to sit down for the meeting. He invited him to his home. He brought him in, and he says, "Hey, I want to help you, but in order to do that, I have a set of challenges or lessons or exercises that I want you to go through." And he was surprised that he even brought him in. And that's similar to my situation with you. not to talk you up, Bob, but a lot of people know who you are. You wrote many incredible books, The Go-Giver just being one of many of your suite of books. And I've, gotten into contact with many authors before to have them on the show, and some have. And you immediately replied to me. And that doesn't mean that you'll, reply to everyone all the time. Obviously, time's a constraint, but I was very surprised to see you reply to me. And I thought to myself, he's literally practicing exactly what he wrote in this book. But my question for you is, you're someone you've been in business for a long time, right? You've written many books, you've had many business successes. What about the person who's just starting off, who might be saying to you, Bob, it's all well and good to say you got to give, and help and do for other people, but I need to pay my bills. I'm in survival mode right now. I need to do what I need to do to get by. What would you say to that person who's asking, how can I focus on giving when I need to focus on myself first?
Yeah. So the premise of that question that person might be asking is, well, this go-giver stuff, focusing on bringing value to others is great after I already have the money and can do that. But right now, I mean, I need to eat. I need to be making money. I need to focus on myself, right? So let's see how that would play out. Okay. And so we're going to pretend that you are the prospect, okay, prospective customer, and I'm the salesperson. And I'm just starting out. I really need the money. I mean, this is something that I've got. So I'm going to focus on getting your money is what I'm going to focus on. So we go into our sales conversation, and I'm going to ask you questions that I've been, taught to ask, but I'm not really listening deeply to understand your needs, wants, and desires. It's more about how I can use this information you're giving me to kind of sharp angle you into a close. When you have an objection, I'm a little bit defensive because your objection, Brandon, is keeping me from this money that I need. And I'm not quite as patient. Yeah, I give a standard answer to the question and then the objection, then I move on. And I'm also kind of closing early and often. And when I ask for the order, you've kind of come to the conclusion, consciously or unconsciously, that I may know my stuff, my product or service may be good, but I'm definitely more interested in myself than I am in helping you. And I'm going to imagine that you're going to be less likely to want to go ahead and do business with me right now, to really sense the value. And I think most people would feel that way. Now, let's do the same thing. I'm that same person, okay? And I'm starting out. I really need the money. It's right. And what I'm not going to do is try to deny my self-interest, because that would be going against human nature. All human beings are self-interested. That's not a bad thing. It's what helped our cave person ancestors survive and pass along their genes to the next generation. Nothing wrong with self-interest. But what I'm going to do, rather than deny my self-interest, is I'm going to suspend it. I'm going to place it off to the side. And I am going to focus on bringing immense value to you. So now when I ask you these questions, when we're in the sales presentation, I'm simply discovering what you, Brandon, what you need, what you, the customer, wants, what you desire. And as you answer, I am listening deeply, because my focus is not on myself. I put that aside. My focus is on you. Okay. And even when you answer, if I'm not absolutely sure I know what you mean, because I know we all come from different belief systems, right? I'm going to tactfully and diplomatically ask you to explain and to expound upon it. And you're going to really know that I care about you and making sure I understand your needs. When you have an objection, I'm going to welcome it. And I'm going to tell you why it's good that you have that, because you need to feel comfortable with the process if we're going to be able to, to work together. And then what we're going to do is not just answer the surface part of the objection, but we're going to go deep together and discover what the real root cause of the objection is. And then we're going to work through that together in order to advance the process. And it's only when I absolutely know that I know what you need, want, and desire am I going to connect the benefits of my product or service with those needs, wants, and desires. And Brandon, by the time I ask you for the order, I'm simply asking you to take action on something you've already told me you want to do. Are you more likely or less likely to want to do business with me right now? And the chances are probably more so. I often, when I speak at a sales conference, a corporate conference, okay, and I can have, lots of salespeople in that thing, and I begin with a question, and that is, or with a statement, and that's this: nobody is going to buy from you because you have a quota to meet. And we all laugh just like that because we know it's true. No one's going to buy from me or from you because you have a quota to me. They're not going to buy from you because you need the money or I need the money. They're not even going to buy from us because we are really nice people. They're going to buy from you because they believe they will be better off by doing so than by not doing so. And that's the only reason why anyone should buy from you or from me or from anyone else. When we understand this, now we understand why the go-giver way is the one that works much faster than the other way. Focus on yourself, and because you need the money and think they're going to buy. They're not going to buy from you for that reason. So you're actually better off. It's in your self-interest to actually place their interest before your own.
And people feel that too. When you're having a conversation with someone, especially when it's a sales conversation, number one, people are already on the defensive because they know that there's a possibility that you could offer them or sell them something.
Sure.
And when you sit with them, you've got the person who, even if they're saying the complete opposite, you can feel almost a vibe from people when they are thinking of them. And I'm speaking for myself. I remember when I started in sales, I'm 28 now, 10 years ago when I started, I was all about me and wanting to make money and wanting to hit a quota. And for me, it was a game of wanting to be at the top of the leaderboard. And
Mhm.
my priority wasn't the person. My priority was
Sure.
the game. And I still took care of people, but then you had my partner at the time, who he became my partner years later at the company, training other salespeople. But I would be very quick with my customers, and they'd come in. It was retail sales. They'd come in, I'd get them what they needed. I'd ask them a couple of questions about their life, and then they'd be gone. My partner, in the time that I've helped two people, would help one person. And I always used to make fun of him. His last name was Miller, so we called him Miller Time, right? Because he spent a lot of time, and we're like, Sean, if you could speed things up a little bit quicker, you could get to more people and make more money. And he said, well, Brandon, I have a feeling that what I'm doing is going to garner me better results long term. But I was so young, I had no idea what he was talking about. I was like, okay, I'm going to keep being up here on the board. You're going to keep being towards the middle, being average. A couple years go by. I'm still relying on those everyday sales, meeting new people, because my past customers, I wouldn't know their name if I saw it. I wouldn't recognize them if I saw them, but I had to keep helping new people. While now Sean's getting phone calls every single day. He's got his customers calling him back saying, Sean, you took great care of us 2 years ago. We're ready to come back in to get a new phone. We sold cell phones. And I would be there and I'd be like, wow, Sean is earning thousands of dollars each month simply by helping his repeat customers who already know him, like him, and
Sure.
trust him. And
Exactly.
here I am just churning and burning, going through new people, new people. So I had to learn this the hard way, Bob.
Well, but you learned it. Kudos to you. And at 28 years old, you are far, far ahead of, where I was at 28 years old. So, it's just how we all start out at a certain point. We're all Joe, at the beginning of that story. We were young, ambitious, aggressive, up and coming, and real, but our focus is generally on ourselves. That's just how it is until we learn.
Would you say that go giving is more of a skill or an attitude?
I think it's both because the attitude that someone has really wanting to be of value to another person is wonderful. But then you've got to ask the question, well, how do you do that? How
Yeah.
do you make yourself of value to others? And we look at, the term value, which is a very overused term now, and it has so many definitions and unconscious definitions. And so when I talk about value, I like to compare it to price because many people think price and value are the same thing, and they're absolutely not. Price is a dollar figure. It's a dollar amount. It's finite. It is what it is. Value is the relative worth or desirability of a thing, of something, to the end user or beholder. In other words, what is it about this thing, this product, service, concept, idea, what have you, cell phone, home, insurance policy, whatever. What is it about that holds so much worth to another person that they will willingly exchange their money for this and be glad they did while you make a very healthy profit? Here's the key point. Value is always in the eyes of the beholder.
Mm.
It's not what, and this is what trips so many people up who want to sincerely, genuinely want to add value to others. As human beings, we all come at the world from our own set of deeply held beliefs, typically unconscious beliefs. I call it our unconscious operating system. We see the world in a certain way, and we tend to believe that other people see the world basically the same way we do, which makes intuitive sense. How could it be any different? It's all we know, but it's not true. So not everyone places the same value, that sense of relative worth or desirability, the same as other people, right?
Mm.
So it's not a matter of what we think is of value or what we think they should think is of value. It's what they think, what they feel, what they believe is of value. So we have got to, this is where the skill part comes in. We've got to be able to ask questions. Now, of course, online, we can also research people appropriately, of course, and understand certain things. And we may, if we work a certain niche, target market, we may know generally what they need, want, and desire. We should, of course, but we also have to know that people are individuals and they all have their own right sense of what they value. And that's the skill part. And
Mm.
when we can do that, when we can ask questions and then listen, really genuinely listen, that's when we can, really place ourselves in their minds and in their hearts and be able to serve them.
Yeah, it's tough sometimes because when I'm talking with someone who's many steps ahead of myself, like as an example, yesterday I had a conversation with an individual who's far ahead of where I am, and he was gracious with his time. I chatted with him, we networked, and he, I'm going to make this introduction for you. He says, I'm going to make this introduction. And I'm just thinking to myself, how can I help this man? Like, what can I do for this guy? And I asked him, and I quite just came out and simply said, how can I help you? And he's like, you're already doing it. You're already doing it. Just by having this conversation, you're doing it. But to me, I hear that and I'm like, but that's not really me. Like giving and doing something for someone. Like, how is there a specific question that you ask that you always go to that will help to uncover what that relative value looks like for the other person?
I don't know that there's one question, but I will say this. Okay. I've heard of people who are talking with an old fogey like me, let's say, okay, who's 64 years old. And, and, I may have helped them with some advice or some counsel or something like that. Okay. And they ask me what they can do. And I'll probably give that same, what they can do for me. I'll probably give that same answer. Okay. Cause I don't really necessarily feel there's anything they have to do for me, but they want to. Okay. But I've known of people, young people who got advice and then they said, you know what? But then they looked at their LinkedIn page or something maybe, or they looked at something else and said, I can make their page better for them. Right. Or that person has a project they're doing and in their last sales letter, there were things that I see how it could have related to a younger person like me in my age group. So I can help them with that. Right. So they've reached out to that person and let them know this and said they would just be glad to do it, as a way of saying thank you and as a way. Right. And so I think we can do those kind of things. There's also times we're not going to be able to necessarily add tangible value to someone right away, but we keep our eyes and ears open and just sometimes by writing a handwritten thank you note to that person and thanking them for their taking their time and their wisdom and their expertise, or you discover, you look up online and you find, or you ask their admin if it's not online, what their favorite charity is, and you make a small donation. It doesn't have to be a big one, just a small donation in their name. Okay. And it will get back to them. And you're not doing it to kiss up to them. You're doing it simply to communicate that, yes, while I understand I'm not in a position to bring value to you like you added to me, I want you to know how genuinely grateful for you I am. And this is my way of doing it. You don't say that, but that's what you're saying. So there's many ways. Remember, value is always in the eyes of the beholder. And certain things mean, the thought that you would take the time to do something like that might mean more to that person than anything else.
Yeah, that's very true. I like the outside the box thinking, even with finding out what the favorite charity is, a thank you note. I love the idea. And I personally thank you because I'm going to do this. Look for ways to help this other person, right? A lot of these people who
Mhm.
are steps ahead, they might be neglecting their social media presence or other
Exactly, you never
things.
know, and people like you can, I mean, can look at something like that and just know that right away and just reach out and say, "Hey, I'd let," and that's it.
100%.
Yeah.
Now, I feel that there's an epidemic out there in itself of especially those people who just love to do and give to other people. And finally, that other person tries to give back to that individual and they try to do good for them. And they even maybe it's a compliment, but that person's like, "Oh, it's no big deal." And they brush off the compliment, right? You talk frequently about being open to receiving. What
Yeah.
does it look like to be open to receiving? What does that really mean?
Yeah, well, John David Mann and I John, of course, is my awesome co-author. He and I really felt that needed to be law 5. That's what John I love how John says it's sort of the thumb, of the hand, and as the 4 fingers of the first 5, 4 laws, the laws of value, compensation, influence, authenticity. Law number 5 is the thumb, right? The law of receptivity. Now, the law of receptivity, it simply says the key to effective giving is to stay open to receiving. So what does that mean? It means recognizing that, yeah, you breathe out, but you also have to breathe in, right? It's not one or the other. You breathe out carbon dioxide. You also have to breathe in oxygen if you want to stay healthy and thrive. Never mind just survive. Breathe out, which is giving. Breathe in, which is receiving. Giving and receiving, despite the horrible messages of lack, the anti-prosperity messages we get from the world around us on an ongoing, everyday basis from everywhere. Despite that, the fact is giving and receiving are not opposite concepts. Giving and receiving are simply 2 sides of the very same coin, and they work in tandem, right? So it should not be that you're either a giver or a receiver. No, you're a giver and a receiver. But what you realize is that the giving must come first. This is a law of nature. Okay, we plant before we harvest, but we still harvest. We sow before we reap, we still reap. We give before we receive, and we must still receive, right? And what happens is because of the messages that we get from the world around us, those anti-prosperity messages that people see all the time, whether it's, upbringing, environment, schooling, news media, television shows, movies, social media, where the wealthy are vilified. I mean, it's right. That can get into a person's head, and it does. And it's an unconscious thing. And if you look at receiving as a bad thing, right? Well, what are you going to do? You're going to push it. Now, you may not see it as a bad thing consciously, but it's the unconscious that controls, not the
Mm,
conscious, right? So we have got to really question our premises. When we see a report or a news story or something about how wealth is bad, or question the premise. Well, why? What does it mean? How did that person learn something like that, right? And when we find ourselves pushing away something that someone's giving to us, let's question those premises and ask, why did I do that? Why do
mm.
I constantly, and by the way, we're not talking just about money. We're talking about somebody pays you a compliment. Do you say, oh, no, no, yeah, no, or do you say, oh, thank you so much? Right? I mean, you don't have to be arrogant about it. It's humble, confidence. Thank you so much. I appreciate that, or that means a lot to me. Thank you. Okay, in which you're giving them, right, because you're giving them a thanks, but you're also receiving, right? But it's also, if you can't accept a small check, it's hard to accept a large check and receive
Mm.
that. So we've got to practice our receptivity. And here's my suggestion: that there are people, while we covered it on a certain level, in a surface level in the Go Giver, there are people out there who everything they do is about teaching prosperity, right? So there's people like Randy Gage. There's people like the late Bob Proctor, who we just lost, wonderful teachers of prosperity. David Nagel, Sharon Lecter, Ellen Rogan, Ken Honda from Japan. and many others who they write books on this, they blog on it, they do videos, right? They and not by the way, 99.9% of what they teach is the mental game. It's getting rid of the blockages to receptivity, right? So I think we need to make proactive studies of prosperity and get that good information into our heads, because the yucky stuff out there, the anti-prosperity messages, are coming at us from everywhere all the time.
You're absolutely right. 100%. Just the study of prosperity in itself, and Bob Proctor was absolutely incredible. And I remember
Oh,
listening to him when I was 21 years old, going through a very dark time in my life where I probably would have heard a compliment, not believe it, and brushed it aside. But I
right.
learned that by receiving it makes the other people feel good
Feel
too.
good too. Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
So
Exactly.
we can give and feel good at the same
Uh-huh.
time.
Uh-huh.
We receive by giving, but
That's right.
anything that happens that's great in my life, I'm not able to say this happened because I did this, but even in the book, Joe goes out of his way to even bring gifts to the people in the office. He goes out of his way to do nice things, to give away a sale. I don't want to give away too much here, but to give away a sale, and then something bigger happens for him that he never could have possibly anticipated,
Sure.
because you don't know what you don't know. But the doors that this idea of giving and reciprocity opens are absolutely astounding.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Now that you've lived more, and now that you have more experience, more learnings,
Now that I've lived more, what a wonderful, tactful, kind way of saying, now that you're an old man, right? That's
more
great. I love
wise, and
it.
many more learnings. I mean, you've written so many great books, but if you had to go back,
Uh-huh.
and it's a big question, I guess, but if you had to go back and add a sixth principle or law,
Mhm.
would there be anything that you would add to the existing five, or an additional learning that complements all five of them that you could add?
It's a great question, and I don't think we'd add another law, but I think that encompassing all of them is really making a study of human nature.
Mm,
Really understanding human nature. And I think, when people say, what's the advice you'd give your 22-year-old self, right? And well, there's two pieces of advice. One, I would say, young Bob Burg, shut up, stop talking, and listen more, because you don't know anything that you think you know, and most of what you're sure you know, it isn't true anyway. And I think Mark Twain is credited with saying something like that. I don't know if he ever did, but it's very wise, because it's very true. And then so it would be listen more to others, because you don't know what you're talking about, even though you think you do. And then the other advice I'd give my younger self is, make a study of human nature.
mm,
Understand that everything you do that's going to create success in your life, in all areas of life, whether we're talking financial, physical, spiritual, mental, emotional, social, relational, what have you, has to do with understanding human nature, right?
yeah.
And the deeper an understanding we have of this, the more successful we're bound to be. And this human nature isn't just studying others, it's about studying ourselves. It's understanding and knowing ourselves as well as others.
Yeah. And by studying human nature and by studying others, you're studying yourself at the same time.
Absolutely. Sure. Sure.
That's great. I love that. Listen more. Yeah, listen 80%, talk 20%. I went through a sales training years ago, sell with class, and listening, it's not an easy thing. It's a
No,
skill that you have to get better at
sure.
and get better at and train your ears. And
Absolutely.
so well said. Everyone, if you haven't read or listened to, because the audiobook is read by John David Mann and Bob Burg. So you can literally get the audiobook, listen to it at the gym while you're driving. If you haven't already, go to the description. Links will be in the description. If you're not able to do that, it's thegogiver.com. Go to books and you'll see the entire suite of Bob's books. And Bob, my final question for you is, at this chapter in your life, what are you focused on? What is your mission at this point now?
Uh, I'd say my mission at this point is really just to continue doing the work that my business partner, Kathy Tajanel, and I have done for years. It's really spreading the message of the Go Giver. We have a community now called the Go Giver Community, which is at thegogivercommunity.com. We like to keep things simple. And it's really just creating that environment where people can come together in a good space with other people who are looking to bring value to others, And we don't want this to be another Facebook. We don't want 5 billion jillion people on it. Okay. But we want it to be a big, nice, healthy community of people all looking to share and exchange and add value to others. So that would be right now what we are very passionate about.
That's a great mission. I'm going to check it out. And
Thank you.
for everyone else who wants to check that out, the gogivercommunity.com links are in the description to that as well. Bob, you've been very generous with your time, and I appreciate you diving deep into these topics. And it was a pleasure to chat with you and meet with you. Thank you very much.
I love the work you're doing, Brandon. You're adding so much value to the lives of so many people, and it's really been a pleasure to get to know you on social media as well.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. You have an incredible day.
You too.
What a chat with a legend in the world of personal development in sales. And it's funny because Bob's first book was a sales book, Endless Referrals. And, you know, the principles in that book are very similar to the principles in the Go-Giver, right? But the Go-Giver, those principles translate to every single part of your life. And I know I took a ton out of this conversation. Again, if you haven't already, click the link in the description to go check out the Go-Giver, whether it's the physical or the audiobook version, and as well as the Go-Giver community. I'm going to check that out. I didn't know about that, and I'm excited to look into it. As always, if you took away anything from this conversation with Bob, share this show with just one person who could use it and get it into their hands, get it into their home, into their mind, because these are principles that will help to make our world a better place. Thanks so much for watching and listening. And until you and I talk again next time, continue to be better.